Welcome to the Cold Steel Surgical Podcast with your hosts Amir Farouk and Chad Ball. We've had the absolute privilege of chatting with some amazing Canadian as well as international guests over the past year. While the topics have been broad in range, whether clinical, social, or political, our aims for the podcast continue to remain the same. We hope to inspire discussion, creativity, scholarly research, and career development in all Canadian surgeons. We hope you enjoy our second season as we continue to highlight some incredible guests, deliver detailed masterclass sessions on a myriad of clinical topics, and introduce some fresh new features such as debate and companion formats. We hope you relish the podcast as much as we do.
Dr. Mark Soliman is a colorectal surgeon at AdventHealth in Orlando, Florida. We got to talk to Dr. Soliman about his passion for robotic colorectal surgery and where he sees robotics going in the future. We then went on a deep dive on the use of video in surgery, from how to edit surgical videos to how Dr. Soliman incorporates his fantastic videos into resident education. Check out all of Dr. Soliman's amazing videos on his YouTube channel. Links are in the show notes.
Dr. Soliman, we've been so excited to have you on Cold Steel leading up to this, and we can't thank you enough for being on. For some of the Canadian listeners maybe who don't know you as well, or at least follow you as closely as we do, could you tell us sort of where you grew up, what your training pathway has been, and how you ended up in your current position?
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot. And Chad and Amir, I really do appreciate you guys inviting me to this podcast. I'm really looking forward to it. But yeah, I was born and raised in Tallahassee, Florida, which is the capital of Florida here in the United States. And I did my undergrad in Florida and then medical school also in Florida, and went to Birmingham, Alabama, which is the deep, deep South for residency. And I was kind of bit with the minimally invasive bug when I was in Birmingham, just because we did so much bariatric surgery. And I got turned on also to colorectal surgery at the time. So I ended up going back to Florida in Orlando, to the Colorectal Clinic of Orlando, which is where I did my fellowship. And actually it's a program of 5 fellows. And then I did my colorectal fellowship there, and actually was hired on as faculty to be the MIS surgeon for the group. And I was there for 10 years and built up, I think, a pretty good robotic colorectal curriculum and also the MIS side of the program. And I actually was recently recruited. In fact, actually, I just began in August of this year to AdventHealth, which is a large multi-state hospital system, which has one of the main hubs here in Orlando. So I was recruited into the AdventHealth system, and I'm actually now I have 2 titles with the AdventHealth system, which I'm the program medical director for the Digestive Health and Surgery Institute for Colorectal Surgery. Basically what that means is I'm in charge of colorectal surgery for the 17 Central Florida hospitals, in terms of research, in terms of education, the recruitment, hiring, firing effectively of surgeons. Just think of it almost like the division chief role for the 17 hospitals, and a lot has to do with business and strategy, which is a lot of fun. And then the other side of it is I'm also the department chairman for colorectal surgery, which is an elected position, and it's elected by the medical staff within the department. So it's 2 separate but similar entities. One is the Department of Colorectal Surgery, which is run by the medical staff who are not employed by the hospital. And then my other role is actually being employed by the hospital to develop colorectal surgery service line throughout the entirety of the Central Florida system. So, I think that's kind of a summation of all it is right there.
Congratulations on your ongoing success. I noticed on your bio that you speak fluent Arabic. What's your background with that, and how do you know fluent Arabic?
Yeah, it's my parents are Egyptian. They were born and raised, of course, in Egypt, and they immigrated to the United States. Man, it's close to 50 years now, I think. So they speak Egyptian Arabic at home, and it's specific Egyptian Arabic. Guys, so funny story. When I went to college, I spoke Arabic at home, conversational Arabic, no problem, stuff at church, no big deal. And then I decided I had to take a foreign language credit. So I went to University of Florida and I said, you know what? I'm so good at Arabic, even though I was born and raised in Florida. I'm so good at it. Let me just try to, exempt myself from this foreign language credit. So I went to the Arabic department and then I said, yeah, I don't really need this. I just need the credit. Just sign off on me. And then literally the lady, the professor of the class, I'll never forget her, Ida Bemia, looked at me and she made me read a paragraph. And I did. She's like, Mark, you read on the level of a kindergartner. She's like, there's no way. So I think I speak fluent Arabic, but it's like, I guess I speak fluent relative to a kindergartner.
That's awesome. I actually, when I was finished high school, I spent 4.5 months in Egypt learning Arabic, and I quickly learned that there's a difference between Egyptian and classical Arabic. So I feel a little bit of your pain, and it's I love the idea of an Egyptian boy in Florida. That's quite an awesome place for your parents to land. Can you tell us a little bit about what that transition has been like, switching institutions, and kind of what the thought process is in making a tough decision like that? Because it sounds like you had a great thing going with your previous job, and now going to AdventHealth obviously is a big change. What goes into making a decision like that sort of 10 years into your career?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And I think it's good for the viewership of this to listen to it too, because, I had it all, right? I was a full partner, fully vested partner in a highly successful private practice. I mean, I was doing 6-8 colectomies a week, 100 patients in the office a week, 10, 20 anorectal cases a week. I mean, volume was not an issue. Great partners. I mean, they were my faculty, they were my attendings, and so they're close to me. We kind of had everything. For me, though, 10 years into the career, I almost got that itch in which I was wondering what's next. For me, it was being private practice. Although we were academically productive, we had fellows that we trained. We had 5 fellows per year. There was only so much that you can do in a day without additional support. So if there's research endeavors that were interesting, it was tough. It's very difficult to get funding for that. If there was, for example, lectures that needed to be that you were invited to give a lecture in a different state, I mean, that's time away from the practice, and that's days that you're not getting revenue for effectively. And that I had fantastic support from my group. However, when I looked at myself and where I was at this point, I felt like there was something missing, and I think that thing that was missing was a more formal leadership position. And I had always had a keen interest in clinical and administrative leadership, but with a hybrid in still practicing surgery. And AdventHealth actually had tried to recruit me several years prior to build a robotics program. But I the timing wasn't right, and I didn't feel right about it. I was happy where I was, but when they came to me with this leadership role, with great faculty, fantastic support, and the stars kind of aligned, and the timing was good for me, that I made the transition. Difficult decision, a bitter pill to swallow for some extent, because I'd been born and raised and bred in the private practice world. But I think that was some of the things that helped prompt the recruit to some extent, and also that helped breed me effectively for the new role, because there's so much leadership on it. And being the fellowship program director of my former program, that kind of helped in the leadership side of things, but also as kind of the lead in a lot of things for the practice side at the hospital, almost bringing the private practice mentality to how the office runs in terms of efficiency and metrics and cost effectiveness, and really just kind of running, I don't want to say a lean, but running a kind of a lean and efficient machine is what was really appealing to those that were recruiting me to it. And I think we've had thank God, a pretty good and quick impact. There was phenomenally open-minded and very, very receptive leaders there when I showed up. And they've been really, really great in terms of welcoming me over. So it's been a fantastic transition.
And you have some really amazing partners at AdventHealth, John Monson, Matthew Albert, to name a few. What has that been like, sort of having partners like of those that caliber, and how is that kind of? I know it's early days still, but how do you think that sort of shifts the way you think about things and the way you do things?
Yeah, no, it's a good question because, I have been, basically, it's interesting. I've been in direct competition with both John Monson and Matt Albert and George Nassif and Teresa Sebastian, all those in their group. Now we're 13 in the group now. We've been in direct competition for the past, decade, but never let it, get in the way of a collegial relationship, friendship, and just, it was really just good camaraderie the entire time. I feel like we were all kind of cut from the same cloth of, we're all interested in, of course, high quality. It's a meritocracy in terms of how well you do, in terms of clinical outcomes. We all have a passion for medical education as well as surgical education, as well as pushing the envelope in terms of research, minimally invasive surgery, and, specifically John Monson. I mean, he's, the guy's he's a bedrock in the colorectal world, and just having him be here in the city and watching the amount of progress that he's made within the AdventHealth system on the colorectal side of things, just with his leadership acumen and his vision over a relatively short period of time with him being in town was, absolutely jaw-dropping. So, the recruit also was important to me because I looked at John as a mentor in that regard, because just seeing what he was able to accomplish in, again, such a short period of time was phenomenal. And then, being again in the same group as people like Matt Albert and Teresa Debesh and Justin Kelly and George Nassif and these guys, again, we all have that same common vision of doing some ridiculously cool, cutting edge minimally invasive surgery, taking good care of patients, but also having that balancing act of also having a good work-life balance and also the academic side of things too was also nice to have.
I love seeing you guys interact on Twitter and social media, and you already get the sense of that they're proud to have you on, and I just love the camaraderie between all of you. This is a good segue. You're talking about doing cool, minimally invasive stuff, and I think one of the things that you're well known for is being a big proponent of robotic colorectal surgery, and you talked about getting inspired by your home program and their bariatric stuff. But can you talk a little bit more about why you're so passionate about robotics in colorectal surgery?
Yeah, it's a good question. I oftentimes think about that. And years ago, I gave a lecture, and my two childhood heroes were MacGyver and Mr. Inspector Gadget. And I always felt like I always had this inclination to kind of, rigging things up and kind of thinking through problems. And also I loved tech, always loved tech. And I remember when I was like 5 or 10, I was like, my dad was asking me what I wanted to be when I grew up. I was like, I want to be a robotics engineer. And I didn't know what that even meant. But I loved robotics since I was a little kid. And, it's funny now, when I was in residency, we got this thing called a robot, and I never touched it, never sat on the console, but I felt like it was a good marriage between my love for physiology, love for anatomy, and that enthusiasm I have for technology. And so I don't know exactly what it was, if it was just one thing or just a culmination of many, that just seeing these slick endoscopic operations being done, invasive cases being done robotically, but just pushing the envelope in terms of tech really, really, really got me, kind of lit that fire, that bug kind of bit me. And so it's been really kind of an insatiable appetite from that regards. And so pushing the envelope with robotics, with advanced minimally invasive tech, and also other robotics platforms that are out there is really exciting. This is a good time to be a surgeon.
So was that something? It doesn't sound like that was actually something that you maybe were exposed to as much in residency. So was that something that you sort of took an interest in and took a passion towards and developed more on your own, or was that something that you pursued formal training in?
Yeah, no. So I saw a robot in residency, like saw it, and then my attending I'll never forget, started doing, he like was getting proctored on his cases, and I just watched him do a lap chole or robot chole, and just looking at the wrist articulation of the robot, the visualizations, just the comfort that he's sitting down, the 3D, all that stuff. I was like, I want to do that. Like that's what it was. But then I graduated like a month later. Rather, I started ranking fellowships like a month later. So one of the things that I looked at very specifically was for a colorectal fellowship, I wanted to ensure that I went to a program that was able to train me in robotics. And I selected the Colorectal Clinic of Orlando for that express reason. It was one of the highest volume robotics programs in the country at the time, which meant that we did about 10 cases per year. And so I ended up doing a lot of just self-taught simulation work. A lot of the intuitive reps were kind of interested to see, because there wasn't a general surgery pathway. There definitely wasn't a colorectal pathway. They were only interested in teaching urologists and gynecologists at the time. So I actually would hook up with a gyn-onc surgeon, Veronica Schemp. I can never thank her enough for letting me, as a fellow, scrub into her gyn-onc cases and do hysterectomies. And I would sew on the cuff. I had no clue what the anatomy was, but I was still doing it, and it was great. And I really just kind of took off from there.
I think you have to highlight the fact that you clearly had an interest and a passion for something, and then just went after it, no matter where those opportunities were. So I think that's an important thing that all of our listeners should really kind of pay attention to and keep in mind. So now in your practice, do you do all your cases robotically, or are there certain cases where you'll go straight sticks, so to speak, or how does that mix play out?
Yeah, I'm fortunate now to have enough robotic access that I'm 100% robotic on the elective stuff. So there's of course an occasional emergent case that has to be open, or a multiply recurrent multivisceral section that's going to require an open approach. But those thankfully are few and far between. So no, if I'm doing a case, it's going to be robotic. And if I can't do it robotic, it's going to have to basically go open. The straight sticks are kind of reserved for if I ever have to do, for example, let's say an emergency diverticular resection on the weekend, then usually I'll go straight sticks then, but that's really the only time.
For Canadians, we don't really, I would say, apart from maybe one center, have a really robust robotics program set up for colorectal surgery. I mean, as you say, the urologists and gynecologists do use it in a few select centers, but because of costing issues, most Canadians really don't have access to a robot. Can you describe to us what the setup is like, just the logistics in terms of actually running an efficient robotics program? Because one of the things I've noticed just from watching videos is that it does take some extra time kind of getting things set up and getting things docked. So can you describe sort of the key components that are needed to kind of make that program run efficiently?
Yeah, no, it's a very good question, very good point too. I think that the most important thing to facilitate an efficient system is volume, pure and simple. I think if you do one hemorrhoidectomy per year, that's going to be a very slow hemorrhoidectomy. But if you do 50, 60 hemorrhoidectomies per month, that's a very different story, right? So same thing for robotics. If you're doing 1 to 2 cases per year, per month, or whatever the cadence and the frequency is, those touch points are typically not going to be that efficient. They're going to cost more because you haven't quite got the cobwebs out of the system. You don't really know what your routine is going to be yet. And so the more you do anything, the better you get at that thing. And the better you get, the faster you get. And the faster you get, the cheaper you get. And it really kind of happens in that order. And so for us here in Orlando, I just actually have a lecture coming up talking about learning curve and how to set yourself up for a successful practice in robotics. And it really has to do with categorical buy-in. You have to buy into the idea that you're going to do this. You have to have your why as to why you're doing this. Is it a ergonomics thing? Is it a patient outcomes thing? Is it a marketing thing? What is the thing that's going to make that happen? And then and only then, once you fully commit to it, can you build the program around it? And that program can be built in a highly efficient, highly structured, highly reproducible manner, but it requires dedication from the surgeon, the faculty, him or herself, and also the surrounding team members, the circulating nurses, the scrub techs, the leadership in the operating room. That's the only way that it makes sense. And to the cost point, there's no doubt that the robotic for colorectal surgery, the robotic operation in and of itself does, yes, certainly cost a little bit more, usually around anywhere from $300 to $500 more per operation when you compare it to a laparoscopic case. But if you look at the downstream effects of offering more patients minimally invasive surgery, reduce conversions, able to offer more patients better and more minimally invasive type operations like intracorporeal anastomosis, fully intracorporeal mobilization of sigmoid colectomies with splenic flexure takedowns and intracorporeal anastomosis of a left colon, for example, those patients end up translating to better downstream effects, lower hernia, lower readmission, lower ileus rate, quicker length of stay, and so on and so forth. So if you look at the event of the operating room, yes, it's more expensive, no doubt. But if you look at the clinical outcome improvements that we've seen pretty much across the board, then it makes financial sense. It makes a lot more financial sense when you do it like that. And one other point to bring up, that robotics is expensive because of the maintenance contract as well. But if you do one case per year, then that whole maintenance contract for the year is distributed or diluted over one case. But the more cases you do, the less you dilute, or the more you dilute rather, the maintenance contract. And so that's kind of how that ends up spreading the cost out a little bit more.
That's very well said. And there's no question you need an entire program. I think that's the key term for Canadians that are listening to, or thinking about the prospect of a robot in their hospital. We certainly have them up here on the urology side, intermittently on the gynecology side, but my experience was similar to yours. When I did my HPB fellowship, we were, pretty well trained, felt pretty good about doing even robotic Whipples. But, since being up in Canada, we haven't even attempted one of them. And there's a whole host of reasons why that is. And as you know, it's a very different economic model that's quite siloed. So, for example, the OR budget is completely separate from the inpatient budget. And they don't cross over, unfortunately. It doesn't really follow the patient. I'm curious if you could outline, though, maybe some of the challenges that come with the robotic approach to things. Guys like you make it look so easy and elegant. And in my world, that would be Kendrick at Mayo, for example, superb. He'll do portal veins like they look like art with a robot. But there is certainly some challenges as well. Could you outline those for us?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely challenges with anything, and I think that's usually in your first in the learning curve. I mean, the learning curve is steep. The learning curve is steep, and I think that several studies have shown that the robotics colorectal learning curve is anywhere from 35 to 45 cases, and only once you get to like 45 cases are you starting to get decent, like you're sucking less, if you will, and so that's a challenge because those learning curve cases, they come at a cost. They come at a financial cost, an emotional cost. Listen, we're highly qualified, highly trained surgeons, and we humble ourselves in front of our staff, in front of ourselves, in front of our fellows or our fellow faculty members to do these cases. And it really takes, truthfully, an emotional hit on the surgeon and an emotional investment to do that. So that's a huge ask right there, a huge toll right there. The other things, of course, you can definitely have a drop in efficiency when you're starting out because it takes more time to dock. The team isn't there yet in terms of the efficiency of the team. Your efficiency in the operating room is not nearly where it was probably in a lap or open case. So there's tremendous challenges that are there. But kind of like you're saying, like, you end up getting better once this is kind of your thing. And, I'm sure that Dr. Kendrick, when the hepatobiliary side of things, probably didn't start out looking like he did or she did. But the more that he or she did, the better he or she got. And those challenges that were initially there go away, or at least are minimized to a certain extent. I'm not sure if that answered your question, though.
Yeah, that's exactly dead on. I think that's perfect. The other two things I wanted to ask you with your massive robotic experience, maybe one a little bit more negative and one a little more positive. On the negative side, the company that you mentioned, the sort of the premier robotic company, has a very interesting business model and is generally perceived to be extremely aggressive with regard to their reps and their interaction in general. And in some ways, I think that's sort of put off Canadians being maybe a little bit different than Americans in some ways. I'm curious if you would comment on that, the business model in general. And then the second part, really more optimistically, my sense is that this is a transition technology in the current platform that you've become such an expert in. Where do you see robotics in general going in the future? And that's, maybe in 10 years and maybe in 20 years. I'm curious where a visionary like you sort of sees that future.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, talking about the business practices of a company that, is kind of the major player in the market I think it's a unique position to be in. I mean, you're effectively a monopoly, and I think they're condemned to the business practices that I think they once had, and I hear horror stories of how their reps used to handle hospitals, pitting one hospital system against another and giving access to one against not another, just because of the way relationships were worked out. And I think that all those issues, at least in the United States, predated my exposure. And so I've honestly had nothing but a positive experience in terms of educational outreach, in terms of scholarships and funding and grants that we want to do for robotics training. Granted, the goals are aligned in that respect, but I think that when you're a device company, you're in the business of selling devices. You're in the business of selling widgets, and I think that unfortunately, just like any one of us, the weakest link in our clinical practices is sometimes the medical receptionist that's answering the phones or greeting our patients. And if that person is the least paid or having the worst day, that makes everything upstream or downstream, however we're going to look at it, look terrible. So,
yeah, for sure.
But to that, what was the second question? It was a good one. I forgot what it was.
Yeah, I'm just curious where you see the future of all this going, because my sense is the current platform is truly a transition technology, despite how good it is,
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you're right. I mean, what are we doing? I'm doing basically it's laparoscopy with wrists. Pretty much is what it is. I mean, if you distill it down, that's pretty much what we have right now. So you're exactly right. I do think you said it well, transitional technology, and I think there are iterations of robotic technology in the pipeline that I think the most dramatic thing that we're going to see different is that it's no longer going to be what's called line of sight technology, where it's just between you and a straight shot to the pathology directly in front of you, that line of sight, the direct access. It's going to be more of a circuitous route, something that will be more applicable to, say, endoluminal surgery or natural orifice surgery, where you can choose your extraction site as an example, and then basically deploy a single armed instrument that has multiple tentacles, almost like an octopus, that can come out and do whatever operation that you'd like to do in whichever quadrant that you want to do, intra-abdominally or intrathoracically or endoluminally, for example. So I think that's one of the things that we're going to certainly see. I think that there's also going to be, I know there's going to be lots of machine learning that has already it's in active development now between many of the robotics companies that are out, that use pattern recognition based on the operative video feed that you're seeing to alert you to, for example, no-fly zones, no caution, don't go too far immediately because there's a ureter there, or careful, you're about to cut across the tumor edge, or oh my goodness, watch out, there's some hypogastric nerves there, you want to avoid that, based on predetermined algorithms that are built into the system. So that stuff is actively being worked on right now. I can only imagine, say, for example, what another 10 years is going to look like. So I think that, like we were saying earlier, the future of robotics, I mean, we're definitely in the infancy right now. And I can only imagine what it's going to look like, farther down the road.
I mean, it's a really neat time, as you said, to be a colorectal surgeon and a surgeon in general. It's particularly with regards to rectal cancer, because there's been so much changing from treatment modalities to tools and technology, like you outlined. Without belaboring this too much, I'm curious where you see all these sort of different tools like TATME, TAMIS, robotics, maybe even old school stuff like SILS. How do you see those technologies playing out and sort of spreading? Do you think they're complementary or distinct? Sort of how do you foresee that changing in sort of the landscape of tools over the next few years?
Yeah. In my transition of jobs, I had the amazing blessing of being able to take 2 months off of work. And I had a lot of projects around the house I want to get done. I had a lot of things I wanted to learn, a lot of books I wanted to read, a lot of trips I wanted to take. And one of the hobbies that I've been trying to pick up was that of woodworking. And it always fascinated me. I love creating things with my hands. But one thing I immediately realized was that every single project requires a specific set of tools. There's not a single tool that works for everything. And I think that's an obvious corollary to just take one disease process, rectal cancer. So I think 100% these are very complementary platforms. I mean, TATME has a fantastic place to be played. TAMIS, I just did one today. TAMIS has a great role. I have a TATME combined robotic lower anterior section and TATME coming up next Thursday, in fact. And so I think that there are, as you're saying, with these different ranges of the new paradigms in rectal cancer and the new technology, I think that you really have to, as you do in woodwork, you choose the right tool for the right piece of wood, or the right tool for the right job that you're trying to do, and for that day. Now, TATME specifically is not something you can dabble in. That's a very unique skill set. It's a very, very unique and very confusing anatomical vantage point. So I don't want those that are listening to this to think that you should just kind of dabble in TATME. But I do think that, again, to circle back to the original question, it is definitely a complementary approach for rectal cancer management.
Yeah, I mean, I work with Carl Brown and the crew here, and just watching them do some TATMEs and getting involved a little bit, you realize it's not something that you can dabble in. But I really do, if I can make an editorial comment, I really do like your thought that using the right tool in the right place is going to be so important going forward. And it just speaks again to being the importance of having high volume so that you can really know what tool to use when, and know what technology would be best in a certain scenario. I wanted to shift gears here a little bit and talk about your videos. And that was, I've tweeted that to you before, and I just love watching your videos. I watched them during residency, and I still watch them now in fellowship. They're just fantastically beautiful, and we'll put some links in the show notes below so that people can go to your YouTube channel and watch them for themselves. But they're really quite beautiful. Can you talk a little bit about how you got into making videos of your colorectal operations?
Yeah, thanks a lot for the kind words. It's certainly been a labor of love, and honestly, I think that the kind words that I hear from people I've never met before are the thing that really kind of helped me keep going on it. It's an interesting story. I think the great things like that just kind of happen a lot of times fortuitously. I was giving a course actually at the ASCRS several years ago. I was leading the robotics course. And the challenge of the robotics course is we only have 4 hours to do a right colectomy and a low anterior section. And I had previously gotten tired of telling my fellows the exact same anecdotes in the operating room and teaching them the same wristing maneuvers and teaching them the same exact, these are my instruments, this is what I do. So I recorded for my fellows a basically a whole course on right colectomy and another course on low anterior section. And then when I taught this course at the ASCRS meeting, I think it was like 2016 or 15, something like that. I said, you know what, guys, we only have 4 hours to do everything. I want everyone to pre-watch these 2 courses so that we don't waste any time with any didactics. We just got to go directly to the lab. And it was crazy how much positive feedback I got from these private videos that I had created at that course for my fellows that I just anecdotally and accidentally, out of convenience and almost out of desperation, shared with the faculty at this ASCRS meeting, that I started uncloaking them and publishing them. And then I really just kind of took on a life of its own, and a lot of things that I struggled with. I was like, you know what? No one ever taught me how to do a medial-to-lateral. Let me make a video on that. You know what? I've struggled with this so many times. I nearly, I hate to say this, but I'll say it. I nearly killed a woman by missing this enterotomy. I never want anyone to make that mistake. Let me publish that video. And I felt like it's actually had a much broader reach than publishing it in any one clinical journal. And so it's been a great venue, an avenue, and so I feel like it's been really a tremendous blessing for myself to be able to kind of put that, and really just, it's really humbling to see that people actually watch it. So I appreciate it.
We interviewed another surgeon for the podcast who does the same things for his trainees. And what kind of baffled me after that conversation and talking to people like yourselves is actually why we don't do that more often. It's not like we don't have the technology to do it. Even for open cases, head-mounted cameras, light-mounted cameras, that technology exists. I wonder why we don't do that more often, and if you have any thoughts about why that doesn't happen more often.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's almost sad that we have more powerful computers in our pockets nowadays that can do this type of stuff, and that we don't take more advantage of it. I think one of the main things is just bandwidth. At least for me, I'd love to just have a crew of editors sitting in, with me and editing videos left and right all day. It's just, this is just the realities of clinical practices. You don't get, you get the touchy feely part of it, and you're definitely helping people, and helping a lot of people, in fact, making those videos and teaching that way. But I don't think that, I don't think enough emphasis is placed on that. On doing it, and there's not enough, I guess, incentive to do it, unfortunately. So it really just takes initiative and leadership to just start doing it and get it done. And I do actually applaud the ASCRS, the Society of American Colorectal Surgeons, the American Society of Colorectal Surgeons has really pushed heavily in this direction to allow the community of surgeons to create a video library to submit to the ASCRS, and they get a DOI. They actually get a publication from it. So I hope that this is the beginning of a much brighter future for video library and collaborative video sharing.
Yeah, I think a lot of journals are going that way, and ASCRS certainly has done a lot of really cool work in this area as well. One thing I wanted to highlight about your videos was the fact that you really go over the anatomy. I really like you'll have these series of videos, and you'll start by just like breaking down the anatomy, and you even get these like nice animations that'll show the anatomy. It'll sort of spin in 3D and really show you the relationships of different structures to each other. Things that you would assume that everybody would know doing these operations, but isn't really explicitly taught. And I wonder what sort of made you do that, and why did you focus so heavily on the anatomy?
It's funny because although you hit on the nail, you hit the nail on the head. It's you would think that it's taught, but a lot of people can get through fellowship and residency and fellowship and not really understand, why do we make that incision right there. Like, they're not really explicitly taught exactly the why behind some of these approaches and what it should look like. And for me, the biggest issue was I didn't know what good was supposed to look like in a robotic platform, as an example. So for me, the biggest thing was also training my fellows. Like they knew, of course, basic anatomy, but they didn't know really that next level 3-dimensional anatomy. You're taken through a medial plane, and for me, it's a lot of just I have to close my eyes and visualize the anatomy in 3D and rotate things around. So that video that you're talking about, where it's an app on my iPad, where actually I'll zoom in and kind of rotate around and a telescope and peel layers of tissue back. It's kind of how I think, especially in the operating room when I'm trying to basically detach and reconstruct anatomy in the operating room. So thinking in that way certainly helps, and I was never afforded that coming through medical school or residency or fellowship. I think that a lot of that, not against the people that trained me, of course not. I think just the technology didn't exist at the time, and it certainly wasn't available on like your iPhone or iPad. And so I feel like almost, that's how I think. I have the tech, I have the desire to do it. Like, I think it's almost my obligation to let me share it that way then.
Again, like one of the things I also really liked about your videos, and many people have talked about that, I think even in the comments, is that you're really specific and detail oriented. Like, you need to retract the colon at this angle using this arm in this way. And the way you're talking about it, sounds like a lot of this stuff was self-taught. Was that just something that you learned from trial and error? And I'm curious if making the videos actually maybe helped with that process a bit as well, when you're trying to explain it to your fellows and just looking over your own videos. Again, maybe did that at all help in your learning process?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that level of nuance does not come from the operating room. It doesn't. I mean, you're not there long enough in the operating room. You can't really. You're so intently focused on the moment. You have a patient in your hands right there. It's difficult to really reflect on what's happening in that moment because it's just so intense. And that level of reflection, that level of nuance, and that level of refinement, effectively happens purely by video review. Which is why I'm such a huge proponent of it. And honestly, I almost accidentally stumbled on the video review. And it was really, I have to really credit my fellows for pushing me, and that YouTube channel for pushing me to review more videos and watch myself over and over and over again, realizing how terrible I messed things up and how barbaric I looked in that dissection technique. And I think it was a culmination of many things. It was presentations and requests and lectures and podium presentations and book chapters, little things here and there that just allowed me time to privately reflect on what I was doing in different operations. And I keep reiterating that because being alone without the stress of a fellow being next to me, or the nurses chatting next to me, or the patient nearly dying, for example, or not dying, but person's life being in my hands, you're allowed to kind of just take a step back and really take a different vantage point of what you just did and how you can do it better next time. And that growth mindset, knowing that today's Tuesday, I can be better on Wednesday, I can be better next Tuesday, I can be better the following Thursday. That growth mindset, I think, is critical in surgery. I think is critical in life. And I think that the day that any one of us decide that we have made it and we're done and we have no more to learn is the day we need to retire surgery. And I think that a lot of that reflection and that self-introspection, I think, came, I mean, again, it's going to sound crazy, but just a lot of it came from me watching my own videos.
I think that's really beautifully said. One of the things that you alluded to is how challenging it can be to make videos when you're a busy clinical surgeon and you're operating a lot and you have 100 patients to see in a clinic, and also when the incentives really, as you said, aren't there. Do you have any tips and tricks for making good operative videos? Like, do you record all your operations and that's how you kind of get good footage? Is there someone that's dedicated to doing that? Like, what are the mechanics and logistics of you recording videos to make sure that you have good high quality videos to publish and to teach from?
Yeah, and that's a great question. From a technical standpoint, there's the robot room, in air quotes, the robot room has the capability to record directly into the room on a hard drive, into a centralized unit there. So there's a sign it's universally known that 100% of my cases are recorded. So everyone knows before I even dock the robot, like, you guys ready to record? So we record everything. And then practically what I do is, I was much better about this years ago, where I would download every single video after every single case, watch that video back every single time, on my laptop or whatever, and critique myself and do it that way. Nowadays, we have a platform called CSATs. And CSATs, it's actually a company owned by Johnson & Johnson now, that all my cases are automatically uploaded to the cloud, to the CSATs website. And then, and so now I don't have to do anything to upload it. It's automatically uploaded. And then if I go, and I do still literally watch every single one of my videos whenever I get around to it. Not like, I don't have a time to do it. It's just if I'm, sitting at the house, I'm bored, or, if I'm, waiting on case turnover, whatever it is, I'll pull up a video and watch it in 5x speed. Fast forward to the TME, a rectal cancer case, or an ileocolonic pedicle takedown, whatever, right colectomy. And I'll watch that specific part of the case, because I remember I struggled here. I, didn't know I didn't like how I did that. Let me look at it back again. Let me watch it back again to see. And that was the time that I would do that. And so, but nowadays the workflow is, if there's a specific thing that I want to do, like, for example, I did a robotic subtotal colectomy with ascending colonic inversion anastomosis, or a Deloyer's procedure. So that one is going to be a video. I think I'm going to probably turn that into a video. So that's the specific thing that I want to show. I want to show the inversion technique. So I'm going to find the video. I'm going to dissect it down to that maybe 30-second clip of how I do the robotic inversion. How do I sew the anvil intracorporeally? How I do the anastomosis. And so there has to be a specific ask. And I think that's the most efficient way to do it, as opposed to taking, say, a 2-hour video or a 6-hour, whatever it is. Digest it down to, this is the 30 seconds that I want to tell the story from. And once I know what story I'm trying to tell, it's much easier to effectively tell the story by just clipping that small bit of video out, trimming it up, narrating it, putting some manuscripts and articles around it to support the discussion, and kind of take it from there.
Yeah, it is, I think, again, worth noting that a little thing like that, like having the video automatically upload to the cloud. Again, just in full disclosure, like, I have never used CSATs, but just the idea of having something seamless makes a lot of sense, because even in my own attempts to try and record my own video, that is often a stumbling block when you really have to remember to get your own hard drive every time and make sure that someone presses record, and getting it off the OR computer sometimes can really be a challenge. It shouldn't be, but when you actually start doing it, it often can be a major stumbling block and barrier. How do you use video with your trainees now that you've sort of built up a library? Do you get the trainees to watch video before they come into the OR, and then you review their footage as well? Like, tell us how you use video with trainees.
Yeah, that's a good question. So before fellowship begins, I have something called a robotics boot camp that I do for all of the fellows. And what that looks like is basically they go through basic training, which basically covers docking. There's a prescribed list of things that they end up doing. In fact, I have a YouTube video on that about how to train, how to incorporate a robotic training curriculum into your residency and fellowship. And part of that is the first little bit where before you even start, you're walking them through specific simulation modules, specific videos that they need to review, how I do this, how we do that. And within that, kind of the preamble essentially to their fellowship, I say, these are the videos I need you to watch. And these are the simulation exercises I need you to watch. And I won't let you scrub into the case until these simulation modules are done. You have to score at least 90% on it before you're even allowed into the operating room, and that gets their attention real fast. And then usually, for example, like if I had two left colectomies or two sigmoids today, actually, the fellows are extraordinarily motivated. I mean, these are some of the best fellows I've ever trained, and they were reciting the what I'm saying in my YouTube video in the operating room, like, oh, you're going to do this, you're going to hold it at this angle. So it's become a prescriptive part of the fellowship curriculum, both on the quote unquote mandatory side, but it's really they're just kind of doing it because I think it's helpful. And then to the second point about the videos, how we incorporate it now, because all the videos go to CSATs, and even if they didn't go to CSATs, 100% of the videos get reviewed for the fellows. And what that looks like is they get sent off, and either it used to be I used to do all this by myself, but now CSATs has been able to offload this from me. Is I would give each of the fellows a quantitative and qualitative score, score and qualitative feedback rather, about how they did in the operation, what tips and tricks I can offer them for the next operation that they do. I make them watch their videos, and we discuss it before we basically go to the next case. And so this is done informally, of course. Usually it's kind of conversation on rounds or in between clinic patients or at the scrub sink. What do you think about last case? How'd you do? What do you want to do for this one? Because I know you watched your video. And so that's very helpful. And now the other side of this, though, is it's very clear that when fellows are not engaged and not invested in their robotics progress, and they don't watch their videos, there's a very clear deficiency that becomes incredibly apparent because they don't learn from the mistakes. They don't learn from the issues that they struggled on case, say, for example, 2, and then they're in case number 10, they're still struggling with what they struggled in case number 2. And so there's a tremendous amount of onus that's placed back on the fellows to watch their videos, to watch my videos, to do the curriculum, to do the simulation. And if they don't, then that's, it's their loss effectively.
We sort of jumped into this without really talking about CSATs. Can you tell us again what is CSATs, and what are some of the other? You've talked a bit about the sort of the seamless way that they upload videos and you using it for review. But are there any other tools that you use CSATs for?
Yeah. So CSATs it was a startup out of Seattle, and basically what it is they take operative videos. And it's uploaded to the CSATs cloud, call it. There's a crowd that's not medical. They're not medically trained, but they're trained to judge your video and how it looks from slickness and certain domains in terms of what's called a GEARS score. And GEARS is basically, it's an objective scoring system based on something called OSATs. And then the GEARS score is a rubric based on a 1 to 5 Likert scale. You can get a maximum score of 25, a minimum score of 5. So it's 1 to 5 rating in 5 different domains for robotics based on CSATs. And so you get a crowd-based score nearly immediately based on how that operation, the entire context of the operation went. You get a second score from a blinded expert surgeon in your field that doesn't know you and you don't know them. They're just watching the video. So you get a similar GEARS score that's usually coordinate with the crowd sourced score. And then the final thing that you get is qualitative feedback from 2 expert reviewers in your field. And those expert reviews are saying, okay, I loved how you wristed around that structure. I love how you did this. I love how you did that. I didn't like how you did this. Try this on the next case. And then in addition, what you end up having is on the website is curated and edited videos from those expert reviewers showing, say, what good looks like, showing what like a 23 on the GEARS score for the total mesorectal excision look like. You got a 21, but here's what a 23 looks like. And it's kind of machine learning that shows you the different videos to really kind of help build up your repertoire and really show you what good looks like. But that's just a commercialized version of it. I mean, same thing that we have, though, for free on Facebook, on Twitter, YouTube, not so much on Instagram, but there's lots of social media outlets that do this entirely for free. And there's other upcoming websites and apps that do a very similar thing, but it's not quite as seamless and structured, say, as CSATS is.
You've really helped motivate us to try and use these video aids in particular as teaching tools. And you're exactly right. Both you and one of our preceding bariatric guests, Scott Kimura, use them so eloquently, and they're such powerful teaching devices and concepts. We can't thank you enough. We're going to try and do better.
That's all we can ask for.